I've heard a lot about like a morning routine of like swirling water around your mouth. Is that a good trick? And do we do it with mouthwash? Do we do it with just warm water? And I said to you before the show when we were talking in the newsletter, Compassionate Cure, I used to always buy mouthwash that used to like burn my mouth because I'd be like, it's great, it's going to like kill everything in my mouth. I'm going to have really hot, fresh breath. And then I read your book and thought, oh, I've just killed everything. I'm not actually doing something very good. So let's talk about that. Are we meant to have a morning routine of swishing water around or mouthwash around? And how should we be looking at what mouthwashes to buy?
Yeah. So we always want to try and be as gentle as possible. And so if something says kills 99.9% of bacteria, that's not good. Because and I did this, I told you as well, like we would make our mouthwash extra concentrated so that it would burn. But the commensal bacteria or the beneficial bacteria of our mouth are actually easier to kill than the bad pathogens. FN is really, really difficult to treat, for example. And so when you put harsh chemicals in your mouth, you're going to kill off the good stuff first. And then you'll kill off the bad stuff. And if anything survives, it's going to be the bad. And so you want to try and avoid things like killing off 99.9% of the bacteria, unless you do have a dysbiosis that has been diagnosed properly with a saliva test. Then we may purge your microbiome for a couple weeks and try and wipe it all out and then start again by rebuilding it with what should be there. But on average, no, don't kill it off during the day. In terms of is mouthwash beneficial? So, I would say it's not going to be the thing that gives you a robust microbiome unless, again, we're trying to correct something that is wrong. So swishing with water is great for sure. What that's going to do is just kind of break up any last pieces of plaque or debris that's in there, and then you can spit it out in the sink. I like to freshen breath with mouthwash, so I'll use super gentle, non-toxic mouthwashes at the end of my morning routine just to kind of give me that extra bit of freshness after doing everything, and then I can kind of spit out any free-floating bacteria or plaque that are there. But no, mouthwashes do not make or break your oral health unless you're rinsing with scope or alcohol Listerine.
I also want to mention that, I'm glad that you mentioned that brand. I didn't want to say, I wasn't sure whether I was going to mention a brand, but you said obviously natural, but then I also read that essential oils can disrupt your oral microbiome. So I think we have to like distinguish like what is natural here, because people will say, oh, this is full of essential oils. It's all natural. It's like got no fluoride in, which is nothing I want to talk to you about. And then you're telling me in the book that also disrupts the microbiome. So what should we be looking at when we're making these choices of toothpaste and mouthwash? Like, what are the products?
Yeah, and there are, I'm pretty sure, but pretty sure Scope does. But Listerine, for example, makes a non-alcoholic mouthwash. So even they're getting more on the scope of alcohol-free now. But they do have other harmful chemicals that I'd be leery of. Yes, there are certain essential oils that can disrupt the oral microbiome. For example, tea tree oil is a really good antimicrobial essential oil, and a lot of people will rinse with tea tree oil. But again, you have to be really careful with that because that can disrupt the oral microbiome. So I would, it's okay to use essential oils if you want to like freshen breath, for example, but I would stay away from anything that is considered antimicrobial or antibacterial essential oils. And so that's why a lot of people just choose to rinse with water now and not rinse with anything else. Another big one is coconut oil. A lot of people want to do oil pulling. I always tell people, like, if you are wanting to oil pull, to do it effectively, you really have to swish this around for about 15 minutes to get the effects of this. I can't even get people to brush and floss twice a day for 2 minutes each. So I'm like, let's forget about the oil pulling and just do the basics, right? There are some antimicrobial effects of oil pulling. There's anti-inflammatory effects. There's, really good fats that are in there that are great for our oral health. It's a really great lubricant. It can disrupt some of the bonding of restorations. So you got to be careful if you have a lot of fillings in your mouth, because it can affect that. But that shouldn't be your go-to thing for improving your oral health, right? Like, do everything else first.
So what about fluoride? Because there's this huge kind of conversation around fluoride. That fluoride's good, fluoride's bad. It's now being put into obviously tap water to help with reducing tooth decay, and there's a lot of uproar about these things. Like, when we're looking at a toothpaste, my dentist will always say, use pro enamel toothpaste, use like Sensodyne, these type of things are very good for you. And then other people say, no, use fully natural toothpaste that's not got any fluoride in. Where should we be looking at when we come to toothpaste and products that we're buying for our teeth?
This is a really big topic of conversation in the US right now. I just came across something saying that I think it's Utah is pulling fluoride from their tap water. The EPA has come out, basically saying that there's been studies showing that fluoride exposure lowers IQ in children. So it's really a hot topic. And what I will say is that now we have some alternatives to fluoride that are safer, or that we think are safer based on the research that we have. And so people can use things like arginine. Arginine is a really potent desensitizing agent. And it also is really good for killing the bacteria in the mouth that cause cavities. So if you look at your Sensodyne or Pronamel, oftentimes they'll have really high levels of arginine in them. So arginine is great if you're trying to reduce sensitivity or prevent cavities. Another really good compound that you can look for is nanohydroxyapatite. It needs to be nano, because if you just use regular hydroxyapatite, those particles are too big to incorporate into the enamel to try and remineralize lesions. So in NASA, for example, NASA was who helped develop the nanohydroxyapatite compounds to help keep their astronauts safe in space. So if it's good enough for NASA, it's good enough for me. So toothpaste that have nanohydroxyapatite are going to be great, as well as arginine. I think the key thing here is we need to prevent decay and disease, because once decay passes through the enamel and gets into the second layer of tooth structure, which is dentin is alive. And dentin is connected directly to the pulp of our tooth, which is where the blood vessel and nerves are. And once it gets to dentin is really soft. And so it can progress very rapidly and get and infect the life force of the tooth, which is the pulp. And then that's when we get things like tooth infections and abscesses. And so that is much worse for our health than using a little bit of fluoride in toothpaste. So while there are better products on the market, and I would recommend them, I certainly would never tell a patient that has rampant decay or is high risk for cavities, or who has fillings on every tooth, like, you should go fluoride free, right? Because they're such high risk factors for having a systemic component to dental infection that I would say, we need to fix your diet. We got to fix your lifestyle, your oral hygiene habits. We got to fix this decay. Let's get everything rebalanced. And then we can talk about going fluoride free. So I think the conversation is too focused on one thing, and we're not really looking holistically at the issue. But yes, there are safer alternatives out there, but you got to look at the patient.
Well, I also think there's another area of toothpaste that we've not mentioned, which is whitening toothpaste, where I think there was a huge craze at one point where everyone was getting whitening toothpaste, because obviously everybody wants whiter teeth. And you wrote in your book, titanium dioxide is in many toothpaste brands, which is mostly ones that have like the whitening in. Is that bad? Should we stay away from anything that's like severely trying to whiten our teeth? Is that going to like disrupt our microbiome?
It can disrupt the microbiome. Oftentimes what it is it's really abrasive to the teeth. And so people will say, I have really sensitive teeth. And I'll say, well, what toothpaste are you using? And they say that they use a whitening toothpaste. Well, those whitening toothpastes are just full of really abrasive, like titanium dioxide particles in there that as you're brushing, it's actually removing portions of your enamel. And when you remove your enamel is like a helmet to your tooth. It's a really hard, innate structure. It's harder than our bones, actually, which is interesting, because people say, oh, I broke a tooth, and they act like it's no big deal. And I'm like, your teeth are the hardest substance in your body. If you're breaking your teeth, like, your bones would be crushed. Let's back up and talk about that. But that's a whole nother thing. But yes, it can disrupt the microbiome, and it can also cause tooth sensitivity. So, but you also need to look at, it kind of depends, because if your teeth are dark because you're drinking coffee or tea or whatever, okay, sure, that's an appropriate time to use that. But other people will have lost enamel on their teeth because of aging or erosion or something like that. Once you lose your enamel is the only thing that can whiten. So if you've lost enamel on your teeth, the dentin, which is more gray and yellow, shows through. So the thinner your enamel gets, the more gray and yellow your teeth look. That will never whiten. So if you're using a whitened toothpaste to whiten thin enamel teeth or grayish teeth, gray teeth won't whiten.